This is Julio's Corner, my corner of the internet where I talk about whatever is on my mind. It's usually media that I've watched, read, or listened to, but you never know. In this episode, we're going to talk about what I've been up to since the last episode and discovering Dropout TV. This episode is being recorded on Sunday, April 26, 2026. It's been roughly a month or so since the last episode. Been a bit of a hiatus and just a lot of meandering. I did actually record this before, but I wasn't happy with the end result. So this is a take two several weeks later. Anywho's, what's been going on with me since the last episode? I've given up on the video format of the podcast. It's just not my thing. And I'm always going back and forth and hemming and hawing. But like every attempt, I always decide just to stick to the audio format. The fact is, I've been into podcasts, as a listener since 2007, 2006. Around there, and since the dawn of podcasting, essentially, and when the iTunes app on the Mac got the first added podcasting as a category in their library. So since that point, I've become a fan of listening to podcasts, and that's the key, right? Listening. Audio podcasts was what they mainly were back in the day. There were maybe, two video podcasts around that time. YouTube wasn't a thing in the dawn of podcasting. So I think the Twit network, This Week in Tech, was like one of the few actual video podcasts in existence. And so they hosted their video on their websites. And we're talking about a time when broadband wasn't a mainstream household thing. Most people had dial-up, like American Online, AOL, and Comcast, and Prodigy, I think, was the other big one, and Earthlink. These were dial-up internet providers, ISPs. So video, was not really relevant until maybe, I want to say 2007, 2008, 2009 maybe. That's when YouTube, that was the beginning of YouTube. And around that time, YouTube was not owned by Google. And a lot of people would upload copyright stuff on YouTube, like SNL and other branded programming. Then eventually they got bought off by Google and became the YouTube we know and love today. Anyways, I am digressing. Point is, my passion of podcasting stems from what originally got me into it, which was audio. And this show is amateur hour, and video podcasting requires a lot more work that I don't really have time for. Not to mention, I am a perfectionist. It's one of my many flaws. And I have enough to worry about with how I'm speaking onto the mic and controlling how I say things, trying to prevent myself from using filler words and things of that nature, and my breathing on the mic, to also have to think about and be self-conscious of how I look on camera, and am I looking at the camera enough times and at appropriate times, and so forth and so on. Not to mention the green screen setup I got to do if I want to do videos so that I can give myself a decent looking background. And it's just not for me. I'm not looking to become famous or an influencer. I just enjoy the whole process of speaking into a microphone and creating this thing, which is just amateur hour. It's just me saying my thoughts mostly for a therapeutic purpose than anything else. I'm not really trying to influence anyone. Sometimes I may want to just vent out my political or sociological point of views on what's happening in the world, but it's not something I normally do or do often. I'm not well educated, and I don't have the arrogance of a right-wing grifter to speak confidently in my ignorance. Instead, I think about what I'm trying to say and overly analyze how I'm saying it. And did I say it right? Did I forget something? What am I saying at this moment right now as I am saying the current words that are coming out of my mouth on the microphone as I am now speaking? And all of that is going on in my mind. So yeah, with that being said, video is just one extra element of stress I don't need. And by stress, I mean what I do to what I'm putting on myself. Because again, I do have these perfectionistic tendencies. Now, the irony of it about that is that when I've done video podcasts and then I edited the video on GarageBand, I actually edited it less. It took me a faster time to edit my video than if I just recorded my show on audio and just edited the audio, because I'm isolated to just one thing. And so I'm honed in on what I'm saying a lot more. And therefore, I'm more conscious of the filler words and the breathing and so on. And because you really can't surgically remove said fillers or breathing things and things of that nature as surgically or as precise in a video version, in contrast to the audio editing takes more time, or it has for me personally. So knowing this, from this point forward, I'm going to try to tone down my editing more than I've had in the past, because a 30-minute or 40-minute show would take at minimum 3 hours of editing, and same length of time on a video would take maybe an hour to an hour and a half of editing. So that's my aim. I want editing to be at most double the time of me just recording what I'm saying. So yeah, I really gotta tone down my perfectionistic tendencies and just, leave in more flaws than I normally do. Because again, this is amateur hour. I'm not trying to become famous. I don't even have any social networks anymore. I've recently just deleted my Reddit account, so YouTube is the only social network I'm on now. So yeah, I won't be plugging said podcast anywhere other than YouTube in the audio format from this point forward. Anyways, moving on. In all this time since the last recording, I've since traded in my iMac, my M1 iMac, my iPad Pro, and my Apple Watch for Apple Store credit. And with that store credit, I got myself a brand new M5 MacBook Air. And yeah, I like my new toy. I've decided to try to minimalize my tech more. No more watch, so I'm not stressing about filling in my rings for standing activity and exercise. Now it's just normal. I don't have a iPad anymore. My laptop will be my go-to computer for everything. And also on that end, it will make editing a lot less stressful because now I can also edit at work. So let's say I do an hour and a half of editing tomorrow because I'm recording today Sunday night. It was Saturday/Sunday night. I'll edit tomorrow or Sunday night/Monday night for an hour and a half. And if I still have a lot more editing to go, I'll just finish it at work because, at work I usually just sit at my desk watching stuff. Well, I can be productive and I can finish editing the podcast instead. And it's my laptop, right? So I take it to work in lieu of an iPad Pro because I don't have that anymore. So yeah, it will be more efficient. Just one computer device and an iPhone. And that's all I need. And yeah, I'm just loving the new machine. It's just, originally I was going to get the MacBook Neo as a replacement for the iPad Pro. But then I've realized, you know what? Instead of getting a MacBook Neo, it's been, I don't know, 4 or 5 years since I've had the iMac, or maybe 4 years, because that's an M1 processor. Apple now is up to M5. Why not, instead of getting a MacBook Neo in lieu of a iPad Pro, just get an M5 laptop to replace both and have, both all in one. And that's that. And so here I am. And that's what I'm doing. And of course, there's been a lot of news since the last episode, but I am not going to go into it other than to say, obviously, the world's not in a good place. We have this non-war war with Iran, which of course is at the behest of Israel. And because of this non-war war, we're having unnecessary bloodshed in Lebanon, in Iran, obviously the Gaza Strip, because Israel is continuing with their genocide over there. And people are also dying because of lack of resources, because the Strait of Hormuz is currently blocked by Iran and the US. So oil is not being received in places around the world, which is affecting the whole global industry in terms of needing oil for transportation to mobilize food everywhere. Obviously, the global south is affected the most in all this. So the US is a little bit fortified, but it's just unnecessary suffering. And of course, all of this is illegal. But government is letting corruption endure, and there's nothing I can do about it. Obviously, I'm just a citizen of the empire, the American empire, and I have no say really. And so yeah, it's not something I really want to talk about much, and instead, I will talk about escapism and this new fandom that I've developed. And that fandom is this network called Dropout TV, which comes from College Humor, which was a website, a comedy website, in the early days of the internet, around the time of YouTube, of the early days of YouTube and stuff. Probably around the same time as Funny and Die, when that was a popular spot to go to for comedy. I think I've always confused College Humor with Funny or Die. So I never really gave College Humor a chance, really. And what really got me into Dropout TV recently was, oddly enough, my guilty pleasure, which is The Rookie, the propaganda show on ABC featuring the acting prowess of one of my favorite actors, Nathan Fillion, who I became a fan of since Two Guys and a Girl in a Pizza Place, along with his main starring role in Firefly, one of my favorite and beloved sci-fi shows of yesteryears. So anyway, even though I know The Rookie is a propaganda show because of Nathan Fillion, I still watch it guiltily. And it's the only propaganda show I'm watching now. I've given up Boston Blue or whatever that's called because at the very least, The Rookie, again, has Nathan Fillion. And secondly, it doesn't really take itself too seriously. The stories are really off the wall, and all the characters are likable, and they're goofy and wacky in their own ways. And so, yeah, let's just leave it at one. And in that vein of being goofy, there were cameos of improv actors from the Dropout TV website on an episode of The Rookie. So that got me curious about the show because obviously with that, my YouTube algorithm started showing me a lot of people being disappointed in the folks of Dropout TV showing up at a propaganda show, The Rookie, because of the fact that their comedy tends to be very left-leaning, anti-capitalistic, and so on. So, like, apparently they have a lot of progressive philosophies baked into their network because of their history of how it, came out of the ashes of collegehumor.com. Sam Reich, the CEO of Dropout TV, is the son and nepo baby of famous Department of Labor, I think, Robert Reich, who worked under the Clinton administration, who was very leftist and so on. So he follows that tradition of doing this company. He shares the profits with his staff, with his crew members. I think, very progressive union practices. They actually also do paid editions, which is a very progressive and novel, because most places when you do not an auction, did I say auction? When you do an edition, generally it's unpaid. You audition for a role for a movie or TV show or whatever, and if you get it, great. You'll get paid once filming happens. But on Dropout TV, whether filming ever happens or doesn't happen, you get paid just for showing up for an audition for said role or whatever. So yeah, that's something that's very progressive and cool about this network. So yeah, there was a lot of people that showed disappointment because they were in this propaganda show, The Rookie, which is obviously antithetical to the things that a lot of the crew members talk about on the network in various shows and whatnot. Anyways, because of that, clips of different shows from Dropout started showing up on YouTube. Clips from Make Some Noise, from Game Changer, and from a quiz show called Actually piqued my interest. I started watching those and I started getting into it. And then I finally decided to sign up. And one other bonus that came of it is I'm also starting to get back into Dungeons and Dragons, specifically watching people play it, because I watched Vox Machina and The Mighty Nine on Amazon Prime Video, which apparently are based on these D&D campaigns from this group of voice actors in a company called Critical Role, which I believe is a spin-off from Geek and Sundry, which was a company, again, early days of the internet, around the same times of College Humor, I want to say, made by Will Wheaton and Felicia Day of web internet fame. She did that. The Guild was her favorite. Was her famous web series, and of course, she was in the famous web movie that came out with Neil Patrick Harris during the actor strike in the early days of early 2000s, called Dr. Horrible's Sing Along. Anyways, a lot of tangents here. Point is, what is my point? Yes, Critical Role. So, the Mighty Nine and Legends of Vox Machina, two very popular cartoons in Amazon Prime Video, are actually adapted from these D&D campaigns by Critical Role, by these voice actors who also reprised their roles in the cartoon. But anyways, so I started watching those clips, and Brennan Lee Mulligan, who is part of Dropout TV, who's also done things with Critical Role. He has his own D&D campaigns that he does on Dropout TV. And the one that I saw in its completion is called Dungeons and Drag Queens with Monet Exchange and Bob the Drag Queen, who I know from The Traders. So all these fun coincidences and links of, degrees of separation from the guilty pleasure that is The Rookie, watching The Traders reality game series on Peacock, and of course the British one, and these YouTube clips culminated in me getting a membership with Dropout TV. So yeah, all of this has been fun, watching all the different original programming of Dropout TV. I finished Dungeons and Drag Queens. I've finished binging all 7 seasons of Game Changer, which is a very cool premise. It's a game show that's always changing, hence the name Game Changer. And its foundation, at its core, it's improvisational comedy. However, the cast members or contestants, quote unquote, don't know what they're getting into when they come in for their episode of Game Changer, and the host, Sam Reich, the imp, the devilish prankster imp that he is, sets them up for whatever game, he prompts them for whatever game they're about to play. And as the name denotes, for the most part, every episode is a completely different game from the previous one. There are a couple of episodes that are called Game Samers because it's a game they've played in the past. So, for instance, the very first episode of Game Changer, you had Brennan Lee Mulligan, Zach Oyama, and this third contestant, and their game was Make Some Noise. So they were given, so it was basically an example of like, whose line is it anyway? Where they were given a series of prompts of things that they had to enact. The very first episode was mainly like noises, like make a sound of like a chicken doing something or an egg hatching or what have you. That was the very first episode. And then of course, like the first episode of season 2, same crew, same contestants did the same thing again. And so they called it a game. So they called it a Game Samer. And then apparently the third or fourth season happened during COVID. So obviously the shows were now done over Zoom. So it's a Zoom recording. And they had Michael Winslow sub in place of Zach Oyama. Michael Winslow, famous for Police Academy and Spaceballs, a very famous noise-making guy with his mouth. He went up against Brennan Lee Mulligan and the third guy whose name escapes me. So that was, so those were examples of game samers. So there were a couple of situations where they had game samers, but for the most part, every episode is a completely new show of called. It's a completely new concept and premise of Game Changer. One of my favorite ones is where they decided, or Brennan Lee Mulligan, I should say, behind Sam Rush's back, because remember, Sam Rush is also not only is he the host of this show, but he's also the CEO of the company. Somehow, Brennan Lee Mulligan was able to orchestrate this grand design behind Sam Rush's back with the crew of the show, with other executives of the show, with even Sam Rush's own wife, who's part of the company. She's like I think she's a fellow actress or actor or improviser or what have you. Anyways, she's, wait a second, I am confusing. Okay, so the very first episode was not the Make Some Noise episode. I think that was episode 2. Episode 1 was the Truth Machine. Okay. Anyways, point is, and the reason why I'm remembering that now is because that plays a role into this episode that I'm talking about. So anyway, was it season 7? I guess it was the last season, season 7. So he orchestrated a game behind Sam Rush's back. So instead of Game Changer, it was called Change Gamer. And of course, the contestant was Sam Rush himself. The host was now Brennan Lee Mulligan. He was essentially, quote unquote, kidnapped, because obviously it wasn't really a kidnapping, because it's a show. And he could have easily just, if he didn't want to play along, he could have just walked out. Also, he's the CEO, and it would be illegal to kidnap someone. So no, he wasn't really kidnapped. But anyway, he was sequestered into an escape castle, and he had to solve a series of clues, like escape rooms are, but in this case, a castle, to escape his capture from the host Brennan Lee Mulligan / the Minotaur. And this episode, the reason what made this my favorite, after binging all 7 seasons, is that there were clues in the escape room that were references to episodes of Game Changer throughout all 7 seasons. So there was the Truth Machine, which I just remembered as I was thinking of the escape room that he had to deal with, answering very embarrassing questions about himself, because his wife was obviously the Truth Machine and she was locked up in the castle with him. There was this mount that he had to add. He had to unlock something from this mount apparatus that was a reference to one of the games. There were all these pictures that were a reference to the escape room that Brennan Lee Mulligan, along with Shaban and Lou, last name I forget, they were locked in. The green room actually was their escape room that Sam Reich locked them in. And that was one of the clues that they had to solve to escape said escape room. So, the tables were turned. He was getting a taste of his own medicine in that situation. Oh, there was this typewriter that the keys were all P's, which was a reference from an episode of Game Changer where a contestant had to reference a typewriter with all P's in it. And they did show a video clip, for those who don't remember what this was referencing, they did that. So yeah, it was a fun episode that he had to solve all these clues. And the fact that he can actually remember every episode that these clues reference is kind of incredible, being that, we're talking 7 years of recordings that he was a part of as a host. And yet he was able to, he has an impeccable memory to be able to recall all of this, right off the top of his head. Whereas, most people can't remember what they what they ate last week, let alone remembering references to 7 years of programming that he was a part of. Like that's incredible. So, and another cool thing, because of Game Changer, there were 3 shows that spinned off from Game Changer. One I mentioned is Make Some Noise. So now Make Some Noise, which, like I mentioned, there was a bunch of versions of Make Some Noise in Game Changer. I believe the second episode was the original. And then every subsequent season, you had the same 3 contestants do it. Brendan Lee Mulligan, Zach Oyama, and the third guy whose name I don't remember. Because of how well received that particular Game Changer concept was, and the fact that they made so many, they've redone it so many times, made game samers, so to speak. They decided, you know what, this works. Let's just make a spin-off show. So Make Some Noise, the show came out of it. Dirty Laundry is another game that came from Game Changer, and that was I think they only did 2 versions of that, and this was during COVID actually, where they first did a version of it in Game Changer, where you had a bunch of people together. The host would mention a dirty secret, basically. It's like a truth or dare. Never have I ever. It's basically never have I ever, right? The game where people hold up their fingers or whatever, and you would all say never have I ever, blah blah blah. And if you did, you would put down a finger. In this situation, one of them obviously did the thing that the host is saying. They would have to guess which of them is the one who did it. And if you guess right, you got a point. If you all guess wrong, well, then the person who did it gets 3 points for fooling all of you into not guessing correctly. And of course, the way you know who did it, the person who did it at the end of your guesses would take a sip of whatever they're drinking. Usually it's water, I believe. So out of that came the show Dirty Laundry. So Make Some Noise, Dirty Laundry. The third one that I'm not quite a fan of is Crowd Control, and that's a recent addition. So Crowd Control came from this one premise, this one episode of Game Changer, where they had all stand-up comedians. They had what's his face? They had Josh Johnson from the Daily Show fame. They had Giancarlo Cerezi. And they had this other guy, something Archery. I think his name is John Archery or Mark Archery. I forget his first name. Last name Archery. And they would do crowd work. So they leave their podium and go to the little stage right, and they would pick a member from the audience. This is one of the first Game Changer episodes that actually had a live in studio. What am I saying? Live in studio, where they had a live in audience, I should say, a studio audience, and so they would do crowd work with the audience members who volunteered for crowd work, and then of course they would after the warm up, where you just pick people at random, you would then have the ones who really want to get involved show their T-shirts that had prompts telling you what to ask them about, like what salacious or good material they're willing to reveal that you can do crowd work with. And then of course the third round would be people with red shirts, as they would call red flags. So it would be things that are a little more controversial, that could go in a wrong, could bomb, so to speak, because it's something that might not be, unless you're a really adept comedian, you might not really be able to make it work, and it might just, bomb. So what made it work in the original inception in Game Changer was the fact that you had 3 stand-up comics. And obviously stand-up comics, when they're, doing stand-up throughout the country in comedy clubs and whatnot, there comes times where they do crowd work. So it's something that's ingrained in their skill set. So the show, the spin-off Crowd Control, that came of it, I saw the first episode, And Brennan Lee Mulligan is not a stand-up comic. Bob the Drag Queen, not a stand-up comic. I think they only had one stand-up comic. She did okay. The other two also did okay. Out of, in comparison to the original that had stand-up comics, it was decent. And then you had the second episode where I think they had some stand-up comics, but it didn't. No, actually, no, they didn't. They had other people, I think improv comedians who, stand-up isn't their thing. They do improv. They do sets. So unless you consistently do it with stand-up comics, I don't think it's going to really work out. And I couldn't even finish the second episode. So I'm not sure if that's going to work out, but definitely Make Some Noise and Dirty Laundry. Those two spinoffs are definitely I'm enjoying them. I think there's a third. There's actually a fourth one that came from this. I know Parlor Room. Not exactly a spinoff from Game Changer, but it's another show that they gave to a contestant of Game Changer because of their impression of her was so good in terms of like how competitive she is, and in the specific Game Changer episode that she was in, they realized that they had an idea that they can of something that they can work with her. So her show, Parlor Room, is she's the host, and she has a bunch of folk, fellow dropout improv members, or someone else or whatever, who will bring up a tabletop game that they're a fan of that they want to share with the the crowd, the people there, the friends, or quote unquote, and then they would play it, and it's a pretty fun concept. So, and I think she might have done that originally in Geek and Sundry, which is another callback to what I said earlier about where Critical Role came from, the original, the earlier internet network that was created by Felicia Day and Will Wheaton. So anyways, that's all I have to say. So that wraps up the show. If you have any questions, comments, or any thoughts you'd like to share, you can reach me by clicking on the Contact Me link in the show notes. If you're feeling extra generous, you can click on the donate link in the show notes and send some money my way. This show is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License. This means you can share this episode, remix it, do whatever you want. Just say where you got it from. And as always, thank you for listening.